We begin in South Africa, where the government has promulgated October 27 as the next election date, although it admits the process will likely be just a box-ticking exercise. Today, the government announced that despite the recommendation, the election should be moved to February 2022. There is currently no legal provision that allows for the postponement of the election. The country's election body will need to go to court to get the election date officially postponed after an independent inquiry found that if held this year, the elections won't be free and fair. South Africa is meant to hold local government elections this year, but the COVID-19 pandemic has put a serious limitation on political activity. Joining me now to unpack this story is South African journalist and editor Diane Hawker. Good to see you, Diane. Quickly, so preparations appear to be going ahead for an election, but all indications are that it might not happen. So what's the latest from the government's perspective?
Yes, absolutely, Suleiman. It's quite a tricky situation that the government finds itself in. The Constitution requires that the local government elections take place within 90 days of the expiry of the term. And the Constitution is also quite clear that the local government term expires after 5 years. So if it were to extend that as recommended by the Moseneke inquiry, it would either have to make an amendment to the Constitution, or it will have to have a decision in favor of that from the Constitutional Court. Right now, none of those two things exist. So what government has had to do is go ahead with promulgating the date, even though it knows that there's a pending court case that is likely to ask for that date to be changed. So that's why it seems like it's a bit of a box-ticking exercise where it can't act outside of the law at the moment. However, the law doesn't actually speak to the current conditions that we're living in. Of course, the Constitution was created and written at a time when there was no pandemic, and it didn't factor in things like having a pandemic that would likely have to make the campaigning period quite difficult, which is what we've seen here. So it's a question of creating that balance between having free and fair elections while at the same time making sure that all the actions of the government are in line with what is said in the Constitution. Suleiman.
Now, the IEC says it will go to court. Do we know when that will be?
Well, we heard from the IEC just a few days after that inquiry by Judge Moseneke. Judge Moseneke is actually a former Deputy Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, so quite a senior judge in the South African context. And what he was tasked with doing was actually looking at the provisions that stand at the moment and deciding whether it would be a proper scenario in which to have the election. He heard submissions from more than 4,000 different parties, and as well as political parties, healthcare people, and ordinary citizens. And his conclusion was that it wouldn't be currently a free and fair election. Part of the reason for that is because political parties have actually not been able to campaign as they ordinarily would be doing during an election period. And also it's been difficult for the IEC to register voters as well due to the COVID-19 regulations. We know that tomorrow the IEC is intending to have a press conference, and it's likely that they are going to give an update on the court case that they intend to bring. They need to go to the Constitutional Court and actually request that extension, but they have to put forward reasons why. In addition to the Moseneke report, they've got to put it within the legal parameters provided for by the Constitution to explain why they believe it would actually not be free and fair, and perhaps also suggest how they would go forward with the election when it does take place.
Okay, Diane, for a bit, let's leave the IEC and come to those who will be taking part in this election, specifically the opposition parties. What are they saying about this possible postponement?
Well, many of the opposition parties are in fact in favor of the postponement. And really, this is because of the closure of political space. You know, a lot of parties here still rely on that face-to-face campaigning within neighborhoods. And local government elections really go down to the grassroots level, where councillors, people who are trying to be councillors in particular areas, would ordinarily hold meetings within those communities to talk about the issues that are being being experienced, and also address how they would deal with that. So many of the opposition parties are actually in favor of the postponement, saying that because of the closure of the political space and not being able to hold those meetings and rallies, that they are being disadvantaged because the ANC obviously is a bigger party. Its members, many of its members are in government, and by default, they are actually able to interact with citizens as part of their role as of government, unlike opposition party leaders.
So as it stands, looks like all roads lead to the Constitutional Court. Give us a sense of what this would mean if that does happen.
Absolutely. The Constitutional Court does seem where things are going to end up. It's South Africa's highest court in terms of all constitutional matters. And since this issue deals specifically with a provision that's contained in the Constitution, Section 159, that deals with the length of the electoral term for municipalities, it's definitely going to end up there. What we will see is the IEC submitting some court papers to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court is also likely to request any other interested parties, such as opposition parties, as well as civil society groups who might want to weigh in on this matter, to also submit court papers. And then we're likely to see some hearing take place. And all of this will really have to happen in quite a short space of time, even to reach that February deadline that was set by Judge Moseneke. So likely that all of that will start taking place in the next few weeks.
Diane Hawker, many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
In the meantime, the head of U.S. aid, Samantha Power, has called for Sudan's army to unify with ex-rebels and